Okay, welcome to this brief video. I'm calling it somewhat facetiously the Quasi Nietzsche Scholar. This is a curriculum that I've created for myself. Anyone is obviously welcome to follow it, to make us very well informed on Nietzsche. Um, Short of reading Nietzsche in the original German, short of pouring through all of his corpus, short of reading all of the pertinent secondary sources by other scholars on Nietzsche. So short of that, this will make us I think highly informed and opinions that will deserve to be taken seriously because we've done a lot of the groundwork to make us to make us informed. Anyway, so here we go. Um, in total, there's going to be 28 texts. I'll talk about each one below, and one of them is going to be on the Greek gods. This one is by Carl Karenyi, and we'll talk about it below. And again, I'm not reading the whole book. I've selected chapter. We're going to do 10 Greek tragedies. 4 by Aeschylus, 3 by Sophocles, 3 by Euripides. And these are all coming from out of one book, and we'll talk about it below. 14 Nietzsche texts and 3 commentaries on Nietzsche. Excellent commentaries, by the way, by Rosen, Sung, and Steinbuch. Okay, so let's start here. The first book I'm going to read from, is The Gods of the Greeks by Carl Karenyi. Karenyi also wrote an excellent book on Dionysus. But that book is 400 pages long, and it talks about, yeah. So here are the chapters that I'm going to read. Chapter 6, Zeus and his spouses. Chapter 7, Metis and Pallas Athena. Chapter 8, Leto, right, Zeus's wife. Apollo and Artemis. Chapter 13, Prometheus and the human race. Chapter 14, Hades and Persephone. And chapter 15, Dionysus and his female companions. By the way, Apollon is the Greek way of writing Apollo. Well, it's the original way. Apollo is the Latin version. And Dionysos, again, is the Greek way, and the Latin one would be with a US, Dionysus. Okay, so in total, that's about 110 pages, and I think that's good, and that'll serve us well, because Nietzsche is going to talk about Greek mythology, and he's going to talk about the Greek gods specifically, and he says something to the effect that if you want to understand the Greeks, you have to understand their gods. Okay, next. Now we're going into the tragedians, the 3 major tragedians being Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, and these are actually in the order that Nietzsche preferred them. So Nietzsche ranked Aeschylus higher than he ranked Sophocles, and Sophocles higher than Euripides. So we're going to do about 180 pages of Aeschylus. That includes commentary. And it's not overly done, the commentary, so it's good. Sometimes the commentary is way more, or an introduction to a book is same length as the main text. I'm like, what the hell is that? I don't want to read all this introductory stuff. Anyway, so here, I've chosen the Oresteia. I think that's how it's pronounced. I'm not sure. Which is a trilogy: Agamemnon, Libation Bears, Eumenides. And finally, Prometheus Bound. Prometheus Bound, I think there's some scholarship questions about whether it's actually an Aeschylus play. Nevertheless, it's an important play, and when it is attributed to someone, it's usually attributed to Aeschylus. So anyway, so important. I think it's important. Okay, Sophocles. 120 pages of Sophocles, including some of the commentaries, right? So, and then Oedipus Rex, Antigone, and Oedipus at Colonus. Oedipus Rex is also known as Oedipus the King. Rex is king. And I think this is the order that I'm going to read them. I think some people read it in a different order, like they read Oedipus Rex, then they read Oedipus at Colonus, and finally Antigone, but okay. Unless I learn something different, I think this is the order that I'm going to read them. And then finally Euripides. 100 pages of Euripides, Medea, Hippolytus, and Trojan women. There were many, many choices that we can do from as far as Euripides plays. This book actually has 16 plays, so we're doing 10 of the 16. Okay, but there's more plays. There's not only 16 that that are attributed to these three tragedians. All right, then we get to the heart of the matter. Here we go. The Nietzsche books and the three, as you can see in red on the right, the names, the three commentaries. All of the Nietzsche books are in chronological order of when they were written. Yeah, so beginning with the birth of tragedy. Obviously, the commentaries, I don't know, like, that's not important, but I put them after the books that they are commentaries on. Okay, so you'll see. I had several options when it came to translators, and it's very important, like, who the translator is. But for the most part, as you'll see, I've chosen Hollingdale as my translator. There's one occasion where I had an option of Hollingdale, but I went with another translator because I like Hollingdale's translations and I like Kaufman's translations, but I've read almost all of Kaufman's translations. So I have these other translations, so I might as well read them. Like, why do I have them? So the first book, The Birth of Tragedy, this is the Whiteside translation. I have the Kaufman translation. I've read the Kaufman translation. Now I'm doing the Whiteside translation. Untimely Meditations, Hollingdale. Human All Too Human, Hollingdale. Miscellaneous Maxims and Opinions and The Wanderer and His Shadow, these two, both of them by Cohn or Kahn, are online. I think it's, I forget what it's called. Maybe it's called like the, what is it called? I think it's like the Gutenberg Project, something like that. Anyway, you can find these online. They're online, and these are the only places I've been able to find them. So yeah, thank goodness they're free online. Then we go to Daybreak, Hollingdale translation, The Gay Science. I have, and I've read the Kaufman translation, and now I'm going to read the Josephine knockoff translation. She does the aphorisms part, and Adrian Del Caro does the rhymes, the prelude in German rhymes, I think it's called. I'm not a big fan of the Del Caro translations of the rhymes. Compared to the Kaufman translations, aesthetically, poetically, I prefer Kaufman's translations. I cannot speak to which one is actually doing better exegesis, so I can only talk about really like how the poems strike me poetically. Yeah, so, but it's not terrible. It's just I think Kaufman's is better. Anyway, next, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, perhaps his most difficult work to understand, maybe aside from Will to Power. Hollingdale translation. And then I have two commentaries on Thus Spoke Zarathustra, both excellent. One, The Mask of the Enlightenment, Nietzsche's Zarathustra by Stanley Rosen. The other, Nietzsche's Epic of the Soul, Thus Spoke Zarathustra by T.K. Sung. Both different, but both excellent. Then we go to Beyond Good and Evil and Genealogy of Morals. Those books should be, well, those books go together. Nietzsche said these two books inform each other. I have the Hollingdale translation for Beyond Good and Evil. I also have I've read the Kaufman translation, so now I'm going to go through the Hollingdale translation. And the Genealogy of Morals, again, I have the Kaufman translation, but now I'm going to go with the Douglas Smith translation. Then we move to Twilight of the Idols and the Antichrist. The Twilight of the Idols and the Antichrist, and I believe also Ex Homo, were all published after The Will to Power, but they were all written before The Will to Power. So I have them in this order. So Twilight of the Idols, I have the Hollingdale translation. The Antichrist, I have the Hollingdale translation. Ex Homo, that's the book that I've already read in the Hollingdale translation, so now I'm going to go with the Duncan Large translation. And then I have another excellent commentary, excellent, beautiful commentary by Steinbuch. I can't remember his first name. I want to say it's Michael, but it could be Thomas. I don't remember. I think Michael. Anyway, the commentary on Nietzsche's Exe Homo. Small book, little book. I have it in hardback. I think maybe that's the only like uh, iteration that they make is hardback. Yeah. So if you can get your hands on this book, I highly recommend it. And finally, The Will to Power. This is the Kaufman Hollingdale translation, so excellent. It's the only version I have, so I have no choice. Yeah, and so that's the plan. I forgot what I was gonna say. Anyway, so I don't really plan on doing any videos as far as like after I read these chapters, for example. I don't really plan to say anything. Like uh I'm not an expert in mythology. Like I can read like everybody else, and I can understand what's going on like everybody else. And Karenni's excellent, by the way, so I'm sure he's going to be quite informative. Um, but this is just to get some, some basic footing about the Greek gods. So when we start going into Nietzsche, we have something to fall back on as far as like, hey, what's he talking about and what's he making reference to, things like that. Okay, and then again, the same thing with the Greek tragedies, right? Yeah, so I'm not a classicist. I don't read Greek. Um, I don't even read Latin enough to like even like if these were Latin, I wouldn't be able to do it in Latin either. But anyway, so the point is just again, just to get some footing, like to not be completely like I don't know what he's talking about, who's the skillist, like what is the libation verse. No, we'll have I will have read the plays. I've read some of these plays before, but I will have read the plays freshly. The themes will be in my mind, certain ideas will be in mind, and yeah, so when Nietzsche makes allusions to them or just directly references them, then I'll have some idea about what he's talking about. Okay, now now I am like I have philosophical background. My background is in philosophy, um, but I'm an analytic philosopher, and to me, it's extremely difficult to do philosophy on like philosophers like Nietzsche, just because of the nature of the things they're talking about. It's gonna always be I don't know how to say it. Kind of speculative, right? Kind of speculative. Um, yeah, for someone who does analytic philosophy, we want something, we want to be more sure of what we're saying, and then we want to have like, not knockdown arguments, but like really strong arguments for what we're talking about. And you don't get that with some of the themes that he's talking about, but it's all interesting stuff, right? So it's all interesting stuff, and it's not like Nietzsche like doesn't support his views. He does. He gives you arguments. Okay, some of his arguments are like Kantian transcendental arguments. Um, Basically, the idea is, look at this phenomenon. Like, look at the Greeks. Like, look at the Greeks and look at what they produce. They produce tragedies. These tragedies. And a transcendental argument is basically going to say what must have been true for this to occur? Right? What are the conditions that must have been in play for them to produce these kinds of plays? And that's kind of like a transcendental argument, right? Okay, so that Nietzsche does that a lot, but he does it very well, and he's very convincing because he brings a lot of scholarship, and his reasoning is impeccable in my mind, right? Okay, in doing these kinds of arguments, right? So like Nietzsche, if you've read Nietzsche and you're like, and as you're reading him, you're like, oh wow, that's insightful. Oh wow, like that's right. Oh wow, that makes complete sense. He does. He does. But what you have to keep in mind is there are alternatives to what he's saying, right? And just because like he might present the best arguments, transcendental arguments for a particular like for a particular view, but it doesn't mean that it's correct, right? It doesn't mean that it's correct. It just makes the most sense to us, um, but it doesn't mean that there aren't other like equal like equally plausible alternatives or somewhat equally plausible, and that those are the ones that are actually correct. But we can't know these things, so we just go with what sounds best to us. But when it comes to these kinds of transcendental arguments, I think you have less of like you're just less sure of yourself, right? So yeah, if you read Nietzsche, like I've read Nietzsche and I'm like, yeah, this guy's right. This guy's right. Oh my God, he's right. He's amazing. He's right. He's right. He's right. How come nobody like but you have to keep in mind that what you're not hearing and the arguments that you're not getting. And if you heard some of the counter arguments, or then you might think like, oh wait, maybe Nietzsche's not right. Okay. But I'm not here to do serious, like I'm not here to like criticize Nietzsche's arguments. I'm not here to really analyze them too deeply. Um it's not like I'm just gonna like, swallow everything he says, but I'm here to see what he has to say, what sounds interesting, uh what kind of um what kind of arguments he poses, and like why it sounds so right or why it doesn't sound so right, and what's interesting and how are certain ideas connected, and that I might have something to say. So I might have videos related to the birth of tragedy when I'm done reading it, untimely meditations when I'm done reading it, and so on. Right? Okay. I can't say I'm going to do that for all of the texts, but because I don't know what's going to occur to me, I don't know what's going to strike me as interesting, and I don't know what connections or like I don't know what philosophical opinions like I would think I will have that are like worth sharing. But ultimately, when we're done, again, this we talk like you're going to join me, but like anybody who follows this curriculum, I think, is going to be in like the top, percentile of people who have done Nietzsche readings. Like this is a heavy commitment to his corpus. It's not all of it, and it's not in German, but again, just shy of that, we will be quasi Nietzsche scholars. All right, that's it, guys. Sorry for kind of rambling on there a little bit. Uh, and I wanted to make this quick video, so I didn't like I didn't put my face in the video because yeah, uh, I'm just here disheveled and bedraggled. Is that a word? Anyway, okay, bye. I'm rambling. Bye, bye, bye.